Thank you for
Oh,
coming. I'll give a brief introduction. So Dr. John King, Vice President of Student Life, is here with us, obviously, right now, just to make some opening remarks and to update us all about life at Rogers. So, Dr. King, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
well, thank you, Sam. And I guess we should really update my photo. My junior prom picture is really no longer appropriate. Hope everybody's doing well. We've had a pretty decent opening as expected. If you're on the RA staff, I had let the RAs know a week and a half ago that our spring semester was going to open differently than our fall semester, but also end differently. So what do I mean by that? We did expect that we would open with a good, strong number of positive cases requiring a good number of contact quarantines. And that has indeed happened, although you can see that we're still under 1% overall, and our 7-day average is now down to 0.6. Our overall, for comparison, our overall positivity rate last semester was 0.2. So that's 0.2% over the course of 17 weeks. What I think is going to happen is we're going to have some cases for a while because of the prevalence in the community, in the region, and in the state. And as we move towards March and into April, we're going to actually end the semester much better than we ended the fall semester. If you remember, when we got to about November 11th, November 15th, just a few weeks before we broke off for Thanksgiving and you went home to finish your classes remotely and your finals, the positivity level was getting high. We had a lot of cases, and we didn't end the semester as nicely as we would have hoped, although most other colleges had to stop earlier than we did, but we were able to finish the semester completely. So one of the big changes that I just wanted to get input from Senate on, and as Allie and Jordan know, we did make a tweak regarding visitation, and currently only residence hall visitation within the residence hall that students live in or the residence area that students live in is allowed. And last semester, we enjoyed inter-visitation so that any resident student could visit any residence hall on campus. I can tell you that we were more liberal than most colleges last semester. Most colleges in Rhode Island did not allow inter-visitation. And the Council of Independent Colleges listserv that I'm on, most colleges there do not allow inter-visitation. But we were successful with it last academic year. And if it's possible, I would love to get back to that because I know students are interested in it and I want to hear from you folks about that. But before we do that, we need to make sure that we have a good handle on our positivity rate, that we're starting to go down. I'm less worried about what's happening in the state than I am about Bristol. So the off-campus, house situation and behavior off-campus, that's another lens that we'll have to take a look at before revisiting that decision, which I marked for February 10th, which is only 9 days away. So it's coming up on us quick. So I would like to talk about that with you. And then just also let you know that we've made several changes to quarantine. It's release on the morning of day 10 after 2 negative tests and no symptoms versus release on the morning of day 15 after 3 tests and no symptoms. So people are getting out of quarantine earlier and more in line with how long people stay in isolation who don't have symptoms. I think that's a plus. We will be turning over 13 people will be leaving quarantine as of Friday morning. Between now and Friday morning, another 11 will leave quarantine over the weekend. So we do expect our capacity to be in much better shape at the end of the weekend. So I'll pause right there, Sam, and just see if you or any of the senators have questions and also comments about the visitation or anything else that I mentioned.
Yeah, so I'll let the speakers list pile up for a second, but if y'all don't mind me going first. I just had this question I was thinking about just today, actually. So I know that when we come in as students, we obviously got tested once move-in started, and then show up positive or negative. Um, and then we also believe we're all aware that like if you get the virus, you get COVID, you test positive for I believe 3 months. I'm not sure the time frame. I know is a long time frame, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Um, so I was wondering, I know that some people, I personally got tested a lot during the break, but I know a lot of people, I assume a lot of people didn't get tested during the break, or a smaller population of students didn't get tested during the break. Um, so I was wondering, for those students who initially tested positive during move-in, are they getting the 90 days of no testing? Um, because if so, do we know like if that's the initial point that they got COVID, or if like they could have gotten it during the holidays and now they're just finding out that they had it during that point? I'm just wondering how it's going to work for those students, because who knows when their immunity is going to end, because we don't necessarily know when they first got COVID and therefore aren't testing and might catch it again. If my question makes sense.
Yeah, it's a complicated question, but a good one. So let's start off with just sharing some data points. 200 Roger Williams students informed health services that they tested positive from COVID from Thanksgiving to before move-in and clearance testing with Roger Williams University. So that's great information. They reached out to us as we asked them to, so that we would know. There were some in that too, well, there are some that did not reach out and they knew they had tested positive and they still went through clearance testing and they still showed up as a positive in our system. And then we found out afterwards. So the CDC increased the number of days to wait to rejoining a testing program from 60 to 90. They did that at the end of October. And that's because people were still occasionally popping up, and it could be negative one week, positive the other, because of the antibodies in their system. So we don't have any way of knowing exactly when somebody that came in during clearance testing became positive. So we have to treat a positive as a true positive and go from that date for the 90 days. Now, what most people don't understand or fully realize is that we can be, sort of in this lull period of having had COVID. And while we won't get sick for, 75, 90 days, whatever the exact is, nobody knows exactly. While we won't get sick, we can still pass on new live virus to other individuals. It's almost like we can be incubators. It's the same with the vaccine. Just because somebody gets a vaccine doesn't mean that they can't be an incubator and pass it on. They won't get sick. They won't come down with COVID, supposedly, if the vaccines are effective as they say. So unfortunately, we have to go with that. If a student is in doubt, and let's say that they found out that a friend at home that they were with, despite my guidance not to do anything the week before people came, if they find out that there's a root cause to it, then maybe we can reconsider when they can come back into the testing system. If somebody thinks that they didn't really have COVID, despite the test having it, there's always the possibility, if their insurance will cover it, that they can get an antibody test 3 weeks down the road. But you can't get the test until 3 weeks. And it's, for most students, would be a waste of money, because what we found is that our PCR tests, putting the M&S situation aside, are very, very reliable. Sorry to take so long to answer your question.
No, it's okay, because I think that a concern that I think will pop up very soon in a lot of people's minds is that, I understand that we do have to treat every positive case as a true positive, and that's very important to do so. I think it's just worrisome because sometimes you never really know of like when that person could have gotten it. So maybe like a case by case basis of trying to understand that is also important. But I'll open it up to the speakers list because I know it's kind of starting to pile up. So Jake, you're up first.
Hi, Dr. King. So my question is about the punitive process for people who are caught violating our the restrictions that we have put in place as a university. So, for instance, for both on-campus and off-campus people, if they're found at another house off campus and therefore in violation of the COVID guidelines, what exactly is the punitive process going to look like?
So they're going to go through student conduct, and we we have a house and an apartment in Bayside that are going to be going through that this week based on behavior and decisions that were made, I believe, on Thursday or Friday of last week. And if they already have violations for COVID violations, if it's their third, then they're going to lose residency if they're an on-campus student. It's difficult with the off-campus students, although they're eligible for a $500 fine from the state. And so we run out of options with them, Jacob. You know, it's not like it makes sense to suspend them from the university, because they'll still live in that house and other students can come visit them, and then we won't have any jurisdiction over them. But you're going to see, and I've leaned on student conduct. I've asked them to be strict from the beginning to set the tone, particularly very upset, quite frankly, that some people just ignored the request to quarantine until they got their negative test result and went to other residence areas where we don't even have intervisitation right now. So those students are going to be dealt with the student conduct system. I don't know exactly what their sanctions will be, but I'm rooting for stronger sanctions. And if people think that we should be, you know, instituting a minimum fine, I know that students in general are against fining, but it really comes down to either they lose residency or we fine them. There's not really much else that we can do. It's sort of, so there's not a continuum of sanctions available to us.
Jack.
Hi, Dr. King. Continuing kind of on that line, you know, obviously we have the more stringent policies right now as far as, you know, testing and quarantining and not eating in the dining hall, and that's supposed to eventually let up, hopefully. Is there anything else farther down the line, you know, maybe a month in, about you know, room regulations as far as people being in rooms and being together? Because for the most part, it seems like even with, you know, the policies that you have, it's inevitable. And what, because I know a lot of things that happened last semester pushed a lot of people off campus, from what I'm aware of. Is there anything like you would do to keep people on campus, as far as like allowing certain things and to keep people on campus versus pushing them off campus?
Well, I think, Jack, that it's sort of a reciprocal question. So the behavior of our student body over the next 3 weeks will determine whether or not we have intervisitation, so that people can freely go from one residence area to another if they're a resident student. If students respect the university's request that they not go home for 30 days, that will also have a bearing on our ability to have that intervisitation. So really, it's quite honestly in the hands of the students and the decisions that they make, because we have an open campus and we can't prohibit people from leaving the campus and getting in their car and leaving and going somewhere. So that's from my perspective, that's the key. I'm very supportive of getting back to that intervisitation, and obviously we would like to open the dining hall again, and eventually also get back to in-person events, which I think we can do in the middle of this semester, and especially once we're able to get outside in March and April. I'm looking forward to a very, very strong finish for this semester, a much better finish than last semester.
And as far as your timeline for the initial outbreak, I know that dealing with a case that I went through, it happened where someone tested positive, other people were exposed, and almost 20 days later, that one of the people exposed tested positive. Is that something that you are accounting for in your timeline and what have you going forward?
Well, Jack, I would have to tell you that if the person was involved in regular testing and they didn't test positive until 20 days later, they didn't get it from that contact. They got it from another contact.
Well, I mean, without getting too into the situation, it was an involvement where someone in a household tested positive, the rest of the family tested negative, and 10 days later, one of them still tested negative, but ended up testing positive down the line, being that being exposed in the window of exposure and then it being dormant in them for so many days after.
Yeah, I can only talk about our tests. I don't know what type of test was used there. And so I'm not in a position to comment on that. I mean, technically, it's still possible to become positive up to 14 days after exposure to somebody. Correct. But the level of confidence at the 10-day level is there's like a 2% chance at 10 days that you can become positive. At 7 days, it's something like 6%. So you can see that between 10 and 14, it's very, very rare that that can happen. Not impossible, but very rare.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Zach LaFontaine.
Thank you, Sam, and good evening, Dr. King. I actually have a two-pronged question for you this evening. The first one I want to touch upon about the New York Times article just released about 4 days ago about variant entering the U.S. that emerged from South Africa. So I'm just curious in regards to, has the university discussed or started to implement a game plan if this does start to spread rapidly in the U.S., especially on the East Coast, as we know that it can spread very quickly? Is the PCR, can that detect the B117 variant? Is that something that has been studied and it is accurate? And if so, if not, what are we going to do?
So the test will detect a positivity for COVID with any of the new variants. The test is not configured in a way where it's going to say, this is the UK variant, this is the South Africa variant, this is the Brazilian variant. The Department of Health in Rhode Island is doing surveillance, what they call retesting. So on a certain percentage of samples every day, they test them for these variants. And they will let us know when that variant begins to be enters Rhode Island, and also when it becomes prevalent in Rhode Island, and they'll keep tabs on that. So the variants, our possibility could mean further restrictions, right, on campus, because supposedly those variants spread more easily. The number one thing that we can do as a community, particularly students that live in the residence halls, is when they're with anybody else other than their roommate indoors, to be masked and to keep physical distance. I happen to know that that's not usually what occurs inside the residence hall rooms, based on what students have told me over the course of last semester. So even going to that, which we should be doing anyways, will help greatly with the variants. So it is a concern. It's an evolving concern and not one that we know a lot about right now. It's also not prevalent in New England. I'm not saying that it's not in New England, because it is, but it's not prevalent. There's no community spread of it in New England right now.
Awesome. And then my last question for you, during the Health and Wellness Educator Retreat last week, this discussion was brought up amongst the team per se, regarding the fee that was implemented for the testing for the spring semester. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but that was more regarding the fact that we weren't charged for the fall semester. So it was kind of to cover the spring as well as somewhat combat the fall. But the question was raised about students who came back positive during break and now have 90 days of not being able to be tested on campus. So I'm assuming this is more of a community buy-in, right? We're helping the university with just pitching in the money, just as if it was the SAF fund with the student activity fee. All the clubs and organizations get that money that comes out of the students' accounts. But to say that a student who comes back positive during that 90-day window of not being able to be tested on the university, and that's what basically 2 quarters of the semester, there would be no reimbursement, correct?
Zach, that question's been asked. It's been a common question over the last 30 days as people saw their bills. So I really appreciate you bringing the question up. To be transparent, the $98 fee would have been a lot more if Student Senate hadn't signed on and be supportive by waiving the $165 student activity fee for the spring semester. The $98 fee covers 13% of the cost for a full semester's worth of testing a student twice a week for the semester. The student, let's call it the Student Senate contribution or the Student Senate activity fee contribution, that covers about 26%. So you still have a huge amount that the university was covering, and each test is 25 bucks. So if a student tests for 2 weeks, they're already over $100. So if you can share that information with students and with your peers, we're not doing this to make money. We're just, we have one of the most expensive testing programs in all of New England. There's only about 20 schools that are spending as much money on testing and making it as readily available as Roger Williams. So, and we're not a rich school. You folks know that. So we just tried to find a way to make it work from a budget perspective so we can maintain that testing level.
Thank you for that perspective.
You're welcome.
I heard Adam's letting Connor jump him in the speakers list. So Connor.
Hi, Dr. King. So my roommate will be losing his immunity in about 2 weeks, and he'll be re-entering the testing system. And I am currently tested positive, and I will be re-entering the system at the end of April. I was just curious. I know I asked this to you the other day during orientation, but I'd rather hear it for you in person because it'll be a little bit easier to ask. I was wondering what the chances are of us retesting positive and still having the antibodies after those 90 days. Because I know that my roommate, since he will be re-entering the testing system in a couple of weeks, was concerned about that and getting re-quarantined.
Yeah, well, Connor, if I was in your shoes, I'd be asking that question as well. So I definitely appreciate it. The reason the CDC extended from 60, which we started the fall semester with, to 90 is because somewhere in the 60 to 70 mark, maybe 75, they were having a few of those instances happen. They didn't find a risk after 75, so they added another 15 on to be conservative. Connor, I'm not a doctor. My doctorate's in education, so I'm not a medical person, although I do take a close look at the statistics and the levels of preponderance related to research. And it's not impossible, but we will monitor that. And if it becomes a thing in terms of it happening to several people that had been, that just are coming into testing from somewhere else, we might have to make an adjustment. On the flip side, I also worry, and I'm sure that your parents would worry as well, I also worry about keeping people out of the testing program and then them getting a new fresh infection because their immunity has lapsed and then not knowing about it. And that's the stance I took with the M&S students, the ones that were exposed to that synthetic material, because even though we were told that we had to treat that as a true positive, I insisted that we rerun antibody tests on all of those students and put them back in the testing system because I was unwilling to take the chance, and the institution was as well, just not me. I don't want to make it sound like I was the only one thinking this way. We knew that for them not to test for 90 days was a risky thing. So that's how we look at it. We evaluate the risk and we try to do what's best for the students.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Connor, how are you feeling?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. Are you in Bay Point?
I am, yeah.
Good. I only visit the quarantine side, so I haven't been able to get over and see you guys.
Yeah. That's good.
Adam?
Thank you.
Adam?
Dr. King, can you speak a little bit about how the flu shot requirement went and how that will influence the university's decision-making with the COVID vaccine when that becomes?
Well, thank you, Adam. Thank you very much. So we had excellent compliance with the flu shot. We're now approaching 3,200 students either completed the flu shot, got the flu shot, or they provided their religious or medical exemptions. And I must say the last 600 of those were like pulling teeth or a long root canal because they took a while to come in and numerous reminder emails. Here's what we need to know about the flu right now. There is no flu. The reason there is no flu this season is because of the masking and the physical distancing and the high uptick on the flu vaccine. So at this point, we're still following up with some students, but I think it does give a good blueprint. We should expect that the university will require the vaccine. There obviously will be need for medical and religious exemptions for the vaccine. When that vaccine is going to be available is a big question mark. I'm still hopeful that maybe it would be available to us at the end of the semester to administer to our students. But I do expect that it will be required to come back for fall semester.
Is that it, Adam?
And a follow-up too. So with that new understanding, should we be watching and kind of listening to our home state's progress with the flu shot for college students or for Rhode Island's?
Adam, I think both. I think it's and/or, and you're right on the target. We have a new governor in Rhode Island starting this week. President Biden is still his transition team and his COVID team. They're still trying to remap vaccination procedures and the strategic allocation of the vaccine to the various states. We have a new product from Johnson & Johnson that's coming on the market, and they're hoping for emergency authorization, I believe, next week. That one might require a second shot. It originally was marketed as a first shot, but the efficacy is around 66% on an international basis. It's a little bit stronger in the US. And so it could be, and I'm just speculating, it could be that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine might be given to less riskier populations to start off with, such as people your age, such as the age of college students. And the more effective in terms of efficacy vaccines be reserved for the older population and the more vulnerable population. Now that's just a theory that I've seen around the medical community in terms of information on the web and on different conversations. So yeah, watch your state and watch local. And we are registering as a vaccination distribution center, and we have people that have been shadowing the point of distribution center in Bristol. Steve Malorano and Kathy Souza, our Director of Environmental Health and Safety, and we're ready to do it. We feel we could knock it off really quickly with our student population and our employee population.
Geraldine?
Hi, Dr. King. So I have just a couple questions. So I was one of the students who tested positive between the break and currently. So I'm within my 90-day period now. And I actually traveled right before I got to school, under the like wing of the CDC, because I like called them and I wanted to make sure that I wouldn't be able to carry it at all. So I'm kind of confused because I know that I heard you say that during the 90-day period, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. But I heard you say that you could incubate it, but when I spoke to them, they said that during the 90-day period, there was literally no way of you infecting anyone, of catching it, which is why I proceeded with the trip. So I'm not sure if that was if I just misunderstood, because they did tell me to, like, if I was ever like questioned on whether I could infect someone or not, to just go on the CDC website, and like it goes up right there, and I could like prove that I could not infect anyone. So I'm just, did I misunderstand or?
No, first of all, Jody, thanks for the question, and I'm glad that you're doing well and you were able to travel. I'm only reciting what I have read, and that it's possible, not probable, but possible.
Okay.
And they're saying the same thing about the vaccine.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that was just I know that's what I heard at least.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, my other question was, I also had a question about the way you guys are going about those people who like haven't spoken up, because obviously there's not really a way for you guys to track those people who aren't speaking up. Because I remember when I tested positive, I had to show a negative test in order to start working again, and I got a negative test. So I know that you said, like for a lot of students, you've been able to catch them because they've tested positive, but I'm just wondering about like that little caveat of people who like can test negative and you would just never know that they're actually in that 90-day period.
Geraldine, it's a Pandora's box, this 90-day period. It's still a novel virus. There's still a lot we don't know. So everything that you're saying is possible. But we're just going by the CDC guidance. And the information that I read about, getting back to your first question, which is an excellent one, the information that I most recently read about the ability to transmit, I read on the CDC website. So I will go back and double check what I read to make sure that I didn't mess that up. But yeah, this whole 90-day thing, I mean, it would be much cleaner for all of us if it was a shorter period of time and then we had people back in testing. But the risk is that you, just depending on where the antibodies are in terms of their level of strength in your system, you could have a negative test one week and then a positive test the next week. And then we'd have to treat all of, anybody as a true positive again. And we're trying to avoid having people go through that experience that you and Connor had.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Sorry, my phone went off. Is there anyone else for the speakers list?
Sam, I need some input on visitation. What do the senators think? Bad idea, good idea, important, not important?
Oh, well, we've got a great list here building up for you. So I'll lead off with Ainsley.
Hi, Dr. King. So I'm an RA in Stonewall, and my one concern with like keeping this visitation period longer is I have a few residents who have expressed to me how they're not close with anybody who lives in the building. Like they didn't connect with anyone. They never have, like when they tried, they didn't, like they just haven't, and they feel isolated where they live because of that. And while like I'm doing all I can to be there for them, I know that being able to see their friends would do a lot more. And I'm nervous from like a mental health standpoint on that. So I would be more of an advocate to like look at the policy on the 10th and hopefully open it up more for the sake of my residents who I know like they're having a tough time right now, like due to personal reasons and because of that. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Ainsley, thank you. you're a great RA. That's a good RA perspective. That has been voiced, the fact that, you know, they may live in a large building, but they're the people they feel most comfortable with live in another residence area. And obviously mental health is a big concern just because of COVID and the fact that it's winter and all of that. So that's the number one reason to go towards the intervisitation. And that's where I would lean towards if the numbers support it. I had a conversation with a young woman last week, and she's actually going to wait to come back to campus until we make that decision, hopefully on the 10th, because she just has nobody in her residence area that she's friendly with, and the two people that she relies on don't live in that residence area. So she didn't want to go through 2 or 3 weeks of not having somebody that she could really connect with. So I hear you.
As a follow-up to also as much as the policy is meant to like limit gatherings to people that you're around, I live in a community that I live in Stonewall, so there's 1, 2, and 3, and they're all separate buildings, and we can't tell who's in one building compared to another because on the IDs all it says is Stonewall, and it didn't prevent multiple gatherings that happened this weekend that I came across where they did all live in Stonewall, but I knew like one of them lived in a different Stonewall than the party that they were at on Thursday before anyone got their second negative and was breaking quarantine in addition to having over room capacity.
So check with your core and a boss about the interpretation of residence area, whether or not Stonewall 1 can visit Stonewall 2, for instance, because my intent was it was residence area specific and not unit specific, because obviously Cedar is a huge residence area, and Stonewall, all the buildings combined, still don't have as many residents as Cedar. So just talk to them, and I'll also talk to them to make sure that we're on the same page.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ainsley.
Allie.
Hi, Dr. King. So I echo the points that Ainsley brought up, but I also wanted to bring up the point that I think that a lot of residents will probably just start trying to go to places off campus, whether that's other people's houses or like other places that they can find to see their friends. Because that's one of the main reasons why they come to college to live residentially, so they can interact with their friends. So I think that if we're trying to make sure that students are staying on campus as much as possible and not interacting with the outside community that isn't part of our testing program, reinstating intervisitation would be a good idea. But obviously, if the behavior is not supporting it, then that's another conversation. Although last semester, I think that with the rate of positivity, it looked like it was okay. Although from an RA perspective, you know, we obviously see that sometimes they're a little fresh. But I think that these are all points too. But definitely mental health of residents. I remember that was brought up when you told the other RAs about the new policy. So yeah.
Thank you for that feedback, Allie. I completely agree with you. Important to note that right now off-campus houses are limited by the state to only gathering with their household, so only the people they live with. Now, the ability for the town to enforce that is obviously challenging. But I would love to get back to I can tell you right now, what we're doing currently is on the liberal side, but I believe in it because I believe in our students. But I just need a couple of weeks of evidence, as you indicated.
I believe Tadek's next, but Adrian, I'm compelled to let you know that we can see your other screen as well. Tadek.
Hi, Dr. King. I'll play a little devil's advocate on this end because I live off campus in Bristol. I think not allowing students to like do inter-residence. I think that was one of my concerns last semester. Like if like the commuters or the off-campus residents and the on-campus residents were supposed to be separated to mitigate COVID, then so should like inter-residence mingling, just because it's like, okay, if there's an outbreak, let's say in North Campus Residence Hall, then at least, you know, those students have only been interacting with each other versus like knowing that they've been interacting with Bayside students or anybody else on campus. Definitely, like if obviously the data shows that we're doing well, then of course, like I like the idea of like opening it up so that students can kind of like mingle. But I do feel bad for the commuters because also like the actual commuters, especially like the newer ones, because I feel like they're also facing similar things that newer residents in those like newer residents in like Stonewall are also facing in terms of comfort and like meeting friends, because they also need that opportunity. So I don't know, because I feel like if we're trying to mitigate it, then there should be some sort of way of finding that like freedom to allow like students like those to find their friendships, because they also are having those difficulties. But I understand students that live on campus are more of a priority sometimes. But I'm personally okay with keeping it a little bit extended on the inter-campus residents mingling until like further until further time comes up.
Well, thank you, Tadovic. I appreciate your perspective. And that was the common sense when I met with the VPs and some other administrators from Rhode Island Friday afternoon. In fact, Adam was on that call because he's a member of a special task force called the Youth and Young Adult Task Force related to COVID. And we had this conversation. So, you know, Adam can be my witness that we were already on the liberal side. I hear you. It pains me that we are not able to allow commuters to visit the residence areas, because I know that's important from both perspectives, both the resident student and the commuters. And I wish we could do that. And with some commuters, I'm sure it would be no problem. It's just the consistency of both testing and then their interactions with other close contacts. But thank you very much. You'll be with me if we don't change the policy.
Nikki.
I just wanted to speak because residence halls are my thing. I just want to say that I think it's important that when it's safe enough to allow what we did last semester. I have a lot of friends that don't live in Bayside, so I only have my roommates. Not that I don't love them, but you know, sometimes I want some other interactions. And social media is a killer, and I've already seen like a bunch of people that live in off-campus housing having inter parties with each other. So I know like that point has been brought up that they're separated and so are commuters, but there are people still finding ways, and especially students that live on campus right now are also just leaving campus, you know, doing things in larger groups because that's the only way that they can see each other. You know, I guess how I see it is when you live on campus, you're in the big bubble of RWU. So I felt pretty safe last semester, like being able to go from residence hall to residence hall, but I know that situations have changed over the winter, but I think if we can get to it, I think it's a very important thing, especially for the community building aspect.
Well, thank you, Nikki, and for everything that you do with IRHA. And I do like to think of the campus environment as a bubble because we have so much structure in place in the classrooms, in the dining hall, the fitness center, the library, wherever we go on campus. So we have a lot more controls. So it's definitely a safer environment. And we just have to work with students to help them understand that when they make choices and they go to places outside of the bubble, that unless they're making other protective public health choices, they're not only risking their own health, but also the health of the people they come back and have contact with. So this is the dilemma the whole country has been going through for the last year, this exact paradigm.
I guess I'll take the last speaking turn since everyone else has withdrawn at this point. But to repeat what Nikki said and what Ainsley said as well at the very beginning, I think it does feel like with especially what Nikki said, like I feel like people who don't care about the rules are going to do it anyways. And I feel like it is more of a sanction on those who do genuinely care about each other's safety and genuinely care about making sure that we stay on campus, who are being sanctioned by staying in their rooms. I know, for example, I'm not going to use me because I'm an RA and being in Maple is a whole different ordeal that we've already dealt with, Dr. King. But I have a student, just like Ainsley, who lives in a single, really wasn't clicking well with the residents I have here, but had really good friends in Willow, but isn't able to visit them. And I know I'm like, in terms of mental health, I'm very concerned about that. And I know that this student would follow the rules at the end of the day. But it just seems like it's a sanction for those who are good-natured people who do want to make sure we get past this pandemic, compared to students who are going to do whatever they can to see their friends. And if that means breaking the inter-residence hall policy or going off campus, they're going to do that regardless. So I think when it does seem reasonably safe as soon as possible, whenever that is, I think the inter-residence hall policy to go visit people in different residence halls is very important, because I feel like it will show a message that we can do this, and we've been able to do this as a student body. And two, it's to kind of people are going to do it anyways. I found a large gathering of 15 students in Maple. Most of those students were from Cedar, fitting in a single. So it's just it's so difficult for those who are actually listening to the rules, and I feel like it is important for at least them to have that.
Well, thank you, Sam. I think the consensus tonight from Senate is in favor of restoring inter-residence hall visitation as of the 10th, and I hope that our trends support that. We are getting better testing results as we pass the clearance testing. So like I said earlier, I think a lot of this is going to be up to students, whatever you folks can do, because you have a great social network. I'm trying a few different things this semester. I'm going to be on Instagram. Bless Carol Sacchetti, she's going to sort of be my handler, and I'll be sending out some messages that way. And I'm also going to have a radio show on Thursday afternoons at 3:15. That'll start either this week or next week, and that's going to be basically all about Q&A on COVID, and occasionally I'll have some guest speakers. So I'll count on you folks as well to spread the word, and I'll probably be back here, if not next week, then in 2 weeks, and just to keep the conversation going on how we are doing and hear all of your important perceptions on how we're doing as a campus.
Well, Dr. King, if you weren't already such a prominent person on campus, you're going to be much more, especially after this academic year. I think everyone's really excited for your presence on social media and on the radio. So thank you so much for stopping by for our first meeting. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Stay well, everybody. Take care.
You too. Thank you. Okay. And with that, we'll move on to my report.